Hello, I'm Chris Godber, and this is going to be another video, just talking about some books from my book collection, which I'll timestamp every video, but basically all this is going to be is like a vlog where I talk about some odd and weird books from my book collection, talk about a little bit about each one if I've read them. I haven't read all of them, honestly. I've not actually read all my books. I've read the majority of them in one way or another. Obviously, some fully, some not so, or like half read them. This is going to be quite a diverse selection of books. It's just everything from fiction to non-fiction to, the range of genres. It's just a bunch of books that I found quite interesting, as well as oddities, as it were. So sort of like stuff I picked up that might have a story behind it, or also be otherwise rare or like limited in some way. So I'm going to start with this, which is one of my oldest books, so it's not that old really. It's Anti-Oedipus by Fredreich Engels. I think this is I just picked this up at a bookstore. I think it's bookstall. It's I think it's from the 1950s. It's Marxist philosophy by Fredreich Engels. So it's her Jugenderding's Revolution in Science. You can sort of see the print there. It's falling a bit tatty. This has just started happening, so I'm going to try and fix it soon. Actually, it's quite tough. I tried actually making it through this many years ago when I was a student, and I was struggling. It's a lot about basically metaphysics. He's basically critiquing this person called Durhing, who I'm Jugenderdings. So this is called Anti-Oedipus. I did not get much out of it when I read it, to be honest, when I was at university, because I was studying computer science, but like I said, I picked this up at a university bookstore, but at the time it was well beyond me. It'd be interesting to see if I could wrap my head around any more of the concepts if I read it again. A lot of it, from what I remember, was talking about physics, actually, which is not something I'd associate with Fredreich Engels, who you'd normally associate more with economic theory and political science, right? So yeah, it's basically like metaphysics, which is, and I got dialectics, of course, because it's Marxism. But yeah, I didn't really understand what the point of this book was, so I won't ramble too much about it. But it was, like I said, it was a very long time ago that I actually attempted this philosophy book. But yeah, it was beyond me at the time. Where it will be now, I don't know. At the time, it certainly was. Very, very random, and also I've not read much of this, so I won't spend too long on it. This is a book I just picked up again from a small book collection when I was in the studios in London. It's called The Sockweed Factor. I think actually the main reason I picked up this book was the cover. If you look, I love the cover. Actually, it's got it's got a little bit of naughtiness on there, but I'm not focused on it too much. But I'll just read the synopsis. It's a pirate novel. I think it's like a sort of fantasy yarn thing. It's a most magnificent, gloriously tongue-in-cheek, totally scandalous romp, reeking with vice, blasphemy, and every kind of scurrility known to man. On one level, it's broad, red-nosed, barely printable farce. On another, it's an extraordinarily profound examination of the nature of human beings. So, yeah, I just found that interesting. I've tried reading a bit of it. Like it's not like a classic or anything. It's just some random book I saw that I thought, well, that was sort of interesting just from the cover alone, which is amazing. I love this cover. But yeah, back on some more philosophy stuff again, and I actually have read this. This is quite an infamous text that I found out about through a random conversation after a night out. Some Germans spent the night at my place after I'd been at a gig in London, and I started chatting philosophy with one of them. There's a lass and a guy. We've basically been partying at this place, and then basically started chatting philosophy with a dude, and he recommended this book to me. It's called Anti-Oedipus. Or he told me of its existence, and then another friend recommended me that I read this book a few months later. So I thought, yeah, I better read it then. So it's Delueze and Guattari. It's Anti-Oedipus. It's considered a very important book in postmodernism and anti-Freudian philosophy, as well as it's like with a lot of postmodernism, it's also post-Marxist, I guess. But it's a very hard read as well. Like the way it's written, it's like sort of like. So the basic idea of it is this idea of schizoanalysis, which is the idea of it's sort of reframing mental illness in a way, in the broadest sense of the word. And there's a lot to cover in this book because it's all about territories as well. They have this concept of the body without organs, which is very mind-blowing, but also very difficult to actually describe in language. That's probably one of the points in the book in a way, is just how the schizoanalysis represents. It's like this, I don't know what you could say. It's about like disordered experience. I don't know. It's very hard to just explain. It's been a long time since I read it as well. It is very disturbing to read in places because some parts of it goes into like taboos and like human sexuality, like in terms of like incest and stuff. And I'm just because of the title Anti-Oedipus. And when I was reading it, I'm just like I read this a lot on the tube, if you can imagine it. And I'm just reading this in the tube like, why am I reading about incest and what that means in terms of the social body on the tube, and it's some of the language as well. It's very heavy. It's very like with a lot of postmodern literature. It can be hard to read, sometimes hard going. But this is actually sufficiently experimental in some ways. I found that I could actually find it easier because I've tried Derrida before, for example, and I absolutely hated it. Really hated it. And I actually hated reading this a bit at first. Once I get used to it, but this would annoy some people beyond belief. The way that, but it could also be the translation. I've mentioned this before, but yeah, it's a heady read. It's a bit of a giddy read as well, I'd say. If you want to read something that's a bit out there with philosophy, it's worth trying. It's quite influential now as well. It seems to have rose in popularity, as it were, in terms of the philosophy. Right, well, not a that obscure figure, Hunter S. Thompson. It's a collection of his writings called Generation of Swine, which I read. It's basically just a collection of his writings, and he's Hunter S. Thompson, isn't he? He invented the concept of gonzo journalism, and was a bit of a sort of countercultural writer, journalist figure of his era, 60s, 70s onwards. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what else to say. This is the first book or collection of Hunter S. Thompson's work I read, and yeah, it's brilliant. Like his observations about time, what was going on in culture in America at that time. He goes into the bikie gangs, he goes into the politics, he goes into Reagan, he goes into all that stuff. Reagan, Nixon, obviously. Nixon was the big one, actually. I think he does go into Reagan in one of the essays. Maybe it's been a while since I read it, but it did leave quite an impression when I read it. It actually did inspire one of the... Because there's a gonzo sort of journalist in one of my stories who was slightly inspired by Hunter S. Thompson called Oddball. And the Oddballs Will Inherit the Earth, which is a short story I wrote. So, yeah. I don't know what much more I was going to say about that one, to be honest, but it's worth reading. Now, I've not actually read all of this book. It was a gift from an ex-lover, basically. Bohemians, the Latin Quarter, of which I believe there's also a film made of. It's by Henrry Murger. It's like a classic, really. I did read most of it. I think I got through most of it. It's while I was living in Sheffield. I was reading this. I really enjoyed it. It is like basically it's a classic sort of exploration of the classic conception of Bohemia, you know, so the artistic life and that romanticized sort of Parisian sort of version of it, right? You know, getting drunk, you know, sort of living an itinerant life, going here and there, being a bit poor, being a starving artist, painting lots of paintings brilliantly in the meantime. But yeah, it's just very sweet and sentimental in some places too. It's basically about, if you want to say it was about anything, it'd be about the naivete of some of the Bohemians, how they have this belief in the, you know, the goodness of human beings, but also then reality hits them in the face as well. They're always scrambling around for money. It's a bit of a comedy. It's good. I did enjoy it. I actually might have finished it. Yeah, maybe I did actually, but I read a lot of it anyway. If I didn't finish it, I did read a fair amount to remember the general gist of it, I guess. Okay, back onto the philosophy again. Post-human condition, which is something I want to read again actually now because of the development of AI and how that seems to be going. So I want to sort of revisit this. This is actually quite an unknown book. I don't think it's particularly known. There is another edition of it available now. I don't know much about Robert Pepperell. I've been looking into him a bit recently because he's still alive. He's an artist based in the UK. He's a professor, an academic. This is a book about posthumanism. So it's about the idea of a cybernetic human or a genetically engineered human being or artificial intelligence, all those sort of concepts, which of course now are swimming around in the mass media and sort of public consciousness again. It's also, I really do like the way it's set out, even though some places it looks a bit amateurish. It also has this really good artwork inside. I actually quite like that. So you get these like weird like glitch art diagrams and scientific diagrams. It's like almost like I'd almost call it like it's almost like a sort of like cyberpunk text in some respects. In some respects it reads, in terms of the print version of it, a bit more like a wacky website, like, which I really like actually. I like how it's laid out like that. It's quite anarchic. It's quite an artistic way of approaching it. Like, you know, look at that. That's quite beautiful. It's just like random, isn't it? It's like the way that the print and the layout is done is really. It's like sort of more like an art manifesto from the 1920s, and it even makes reference to that, in fact. But it's also mixed in with this glitch art style, which is not dissimilar to memes like these days. So yeah, very interesting stuff actually. I'll just find there's one. I think it's right at the end. There's something that actually is, yeah. So this is referencing Blast, which is a famous manifesto by the Vorticists, who are a British modernist art group. And this is, I think, by the artist Robert Pepperell, but it's in their style of that. And I think it's, I'll read it actually, why not? Blast, post the inevitable human. Curse the machine for its graphos and logic. Tepid thinker, set around scriptures of intricate dull masters. Frankenstein dev, the local wet sucks the client's brain. 1,024 megabyte long, 32 data string wide stream of data even is pushed against us from the floor doors. To make us cold. Officious scholars keep back infectious heaps. So much vast in poverty to produce. The reader is aesthetics, learned worm, irritant of nature, departmental impersonator, multi-user dungeon, social remarker, the best ice cream, exploiting the old, a good rest. So yeah, like very much in that sort of like tradition of almost like Dada-esque. You're like, you know what I mean? I think. But yeah, it's an interesting book. Not that hard to find. You can get it on Amazon, but it's a different edition. This is an early edition actually, so I guess I'm quite lucky in that respect to have found that. This is amazing. Actually, also, I might send this to Scott if he gets this far. This is your book. I'm a terrible human being. This is a book that I have from a friend, my good friend Scott, and it's the illustrations for Dante's Divine Comedy, and it's amazing. Still in good condition, you can see, Mr. Scott. So I will return it to you one day, but this is just literally amazing. Dante's Inferno, plates, So the illustrations of, and it's just incredible. It's, as you'd expect. Dante's Inferno is a poem, an epic poem about a. It's the one where he descends into hell, isn't it? Yeah. So, and similar to Paradise Lost, except Paradise Lost is more about the creation of Adam and Eve and Satan rebelling against God. Dante's Inferno is about the poet Dante exploring the levels of hell, and it's very vivid. And look at this, look at that, beautiful. So this is a wonderful book. It's amazing. I've actually used it quite a lot as inspiration for artistic drawings and paintings, because I can just look at it and have like a lot of compositional ideas. It's very vivid, bizarre, like a dream, you know, like this sort of thing. Look, it's amazing. It's just one of the most incredible plates, you know. And look at that. Look at the front cover image. It's insane. It's pure heavy metal as well in a way. But well, Scott, if you actually get it this far, I will give you your copy of Dante's Inferno and the illustrations, the Dore illustrations back, because it is actually your book. This is a comic book now. This is a comic book I don't think ever gets enough attention. Transmetropoliton. And I think this series is bloody awesome. Like I think I actually really read one of them when I was like a teenager, ages ago. Like I was 15 and 37 now. And I was really struck by the character of Spider Jerusalem. Again, funnily enough, actually, very influenced by Hunter S. Thompson. I think the writers of the comic have acknowledged that it's a character who's very inspired, a gonzo journalist in a futuristic world full of corruption. It's basically Hunter S. Thompson in the future. But yeah, it's just like quite gritty, sort of like, I don't know, like 2000 AD, except it's a little bit more tongue-in-cheek, I suppose, I'd say. And it's not really exactly like 2000 AD. It's a bit, I mean, I like 2000 AD, don't get me wrong, but it's like 2000 AD is usually more like a bit more grim and a bit more serious usually. Whereas there's like a really amazing irreverence to this comic book, you know. Plus the artwork is so well done. I love the colour, like the colour. Just look at the colour in it. It's so yeah. The use of colour I find especially interesting. Obviously, the actual rendering and the drawings are actually really well done as well. Spider Jerusalem must be a joy of a character to draw, just because of that distinctive glasses and the distinctive style. He looks sort of like again, a bit of an influence on Oddball. So when I actually was writing Oddballs Will Inherit the Earth, which is a short story I wrote in my collection Suicide by Computation, I was sort of thinking of a figure like Spider Jerusalem, the guy on the front cover. It's sort of wisecracking, take no bullshit journalist, basically. So that's a little bit of that. But yeah, this is one of many Transmetropolitan comics, and I'd recommend it above a lot of stuff really. Comic book world, it's really original. One of the thickest books I own next, which I definitely haven't read all of it, but the man who wrote it had enough time to write it for unfortunate reasons. Antonio Gramsci's selections from the prison notebooks. Look at that, it's quite thick. Only War and Peace, I think, is thicker than this in my book collection. And possibly, yeah, actually no, yeah, this is one of the thickest. You can't really tell how thick that is, but that's thick. So yeah, this is a selection of Marxist essays. So it's not that exciting, but it also is, I mean, if you really are into that stuff, there's a lot of essays about specific, talks about Machiavelli. If you know Antonio Gramsci, you know his main contribution to Marxist philosophy was the idea of hegemony. It's just about changing culture through institutions and all that. From what I understand, though I'm not a Marxist scholar myself, I know bits and bobs of it, but I'm not a hardcore Marxist expert or anything. But yeah, this is a ton of essays. And the last thing I was reading, and because I've got a bookmark here, useful enough, is On Education. which will be I think is going to be, I'm not sure if I read it, or the last thing I would have read would have been also on education. So Gramsci suffered a lot in his life. He was imprisoned by Mussolini because he was a communist, member of the Italian Communist Party, had a great intellectual. I mean, I know I've been joking a bit, this is way thick, but that represents the actual enormity of his output, and you have got to respect that. Plus the fact that he was in prison for his beliefs and standing up to fascism. I mean, that takes some brass balls, right? Especially at that time when, Hitler and Mussolini were rising to power. So he's a hero of mine in some respects. I think he's an intellectual hero for sure, because he stood up to tyranny and actually did pay quite a severe price for it. Being imprisoned, and yeah, he was an intellectual hero of mine for sure. I might not agree with all his ideas. I might not be as I understand parts of communism, but I'm not a communist by any stretch of the imagination. But I think Gramsci was certainly one of the more interesting humanist communists, I think, to be honest. Anyway, 2 more to go. Well, this will be easy to cover because I can't read it because my French is terrible. But it's like a situationist text on Kronstadt. So I'm just putting this in because it's interesting, tight, cover, and it's also quite rare and weird. So I got given this actually. So I got given a bunch of situationist texts. No, not situationist texts. This is no. Sorry. Okay. Let me rephrase that. I got given a bunch of random books by someone who visited my studio once, who was very into situationism, left theory, including this book Kronstadt, which is about the Kronstadt. The Kronstadt question in the during the Russian Revolution. So it's got a lot of interesting illustrations. It's got some photographs which are quite interesting. But I cannot read it because it's in French. But like I said, I got given this book, but my French is not adequate enough to be able to read this and make much head nor tail of it. I just like it as a thing that I have, I guess. I mean, look at that. The actual front cover is quite incredible. I love old books like this, so why not? Finally, something I've read bits and bobs of. Dark Matters, Zero Books, quite recent. It's contemporary publisher, Zero Books. And this is, so I've been getting into more frequently doing urban nighttime walking, which I've actually done more over the last few years. Sounds weird, but I just like walking around at light. I find it more peaceful time. I like it. I like just the quietness, and I like just going on late night walks. Also, I do suffer with quite a lot of insomnia, so it just helps with that. To just helps with my insomnia, just exercising out in the night. Plus, I'm also a blood-sucking vampire, so I go out there and just have to suck on some necks and feed myself basically. So yeah, obviously because I'm a vampire, I have to go out there, and otherwise I die. But I've got my sun cream on now, obviously, otherwise I'd be burning up in front of this camera and just like. But anyway, Dark Matters. So it's basically this Nick Dunn's exploration of sort of like philosophy of urban exploration. Yeah, I've not read all of it, but if you want to, this is an interesting book, like quite nicely laid out as well. And I've actually got up to quite far on this. Yeah, I got quite far because I still got my bookmark in it. I'm halfway through it. I got halfway through it because it's very much one you can dip in and out of as well, because it's fairly. It's like almost like it's just one you can dip in and out of. There's like 4 or 5 chapters, I think. It's like exploring a different aspect of the psychology and the philosophy of nighttime walking. Anyway, I think that's way enough. I've already gone in for like 25 minutes. I hope you find any of those book recommendations and my little stories behind them interesting. I've been Chris Godber. Like and subscribe if you like books and philosophy and someone talking about those things for a certain long time. I like and subscribe, I suppose.